Everything that began with Casino Royale ties up with this movie as Bond traces all the shady practices from the previous antagonist to this one organization that is looking to control the world for their own means, behind closed doors and using the world's intelligence agencies to be its eyes and ears everywhere. I do like the fact that M comments that Robert Orwell would be so proud in such a sarcastic manner. Mind you, that's a nice way of art commentating on life in that things are becoming too monitored where you can't do anything anymore without being monitored in some form or fashion. Mind you, this also plays into C monitoring Moneypenny's phone conversation with Bond and playing back said conversation later to M, and being able to track Bond's whereabouts and before announcing that he was scrapping the 00 program. Even though he's supposed to be the good guy, the movie does do a good job of making him look like a complete douchebag. For a Bond movie, it has the tried and tested formula of 007 using less than subtle means to get the job done. Although, in almost every iteration of Bond, would the man ever be accused of being subtle? This is a man that would think nothing of causing an international incident if the means justified the end result. It's really well written to where Blofeld plays head games with Bond in the last act of the movie of faces of foes and friends that he lost over the course of the last 4 movies since 2006. Notably, Dame Judi Dench's M being one of them. I did like that they included her in a pre-recorded video message for Bond to carry out specific tasks, to which Bond wittily responds, she wouldn't let death get in the way of her job. I think everyone turns in a good performance. With the lone exception of Daniel Craig, everyone turns in a stellar performance. I've been adamant in looking back at the Craig era in recent years that his casting as 007 was poorly chosen. I think of Bond, I think of someone suave, debonair, and sophisticated, in the vein of the late Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan, Sean Connery, Timothy Dalton, he's one of my personal favourites. I don't think of someone trying to be a British version of Jason Bourne. The only difference between Bond and Bourne is that, at the very least, Jason had personality, which is more than I can say for James Bland here. Ralph Fiennes is spotless as this version of M, which I later learned stood for Mallory through watching this flick, as it led to the climax, which was a mind-blower. Ralph is just a first-class actor that knows how to get the result that the director wants. Christopher Waltz as Ernest Stavro Blofeld, born Franz Obenhauser. This guy was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, in the fact that he was so crazy, he was calm, and believing in what he was doing. That's a whole load of crazy that no one wants a part of. And the idea that he was portrayed as James's elder stepbrother growing up was an interesting dynamic that put layers into Bond's character, but also the story. However, at the same time, it weakens the story partially, because he's still bitter that his father favoured his step-sibling over him. Unfortunately, there are people like that in the world. Thankfully, they don't go compromising intelligence agencies over the world just to make a point, but the context is the same. Andrew Scott, last time I saw you in any work of fiction, you were being used in archive footage in the most recent season of Sherlock. And I get the impression that he's just being typecast as a villain actor, which to his credit he knows how to play it. And this time portraying a guy who clearly has more marbles than Moriarty. Although given the way Moriarty was represented in the BBC series, it wasn't exactly hard. David Bautista. Or just Batista if you know your WWE. He plays the silent heavy well as a formidable physical adversary to Bond, and to the movie's credit, they use him sparingly to where they can get the best out of him, with him just uttering one single line before getting yanked out of the train. And given the straits he was in, we were all thinking it, but I'm not repeating it here. Really well done and masterfully put together. I may have my beef of gritty realistic movies being too much of the norm these days, but I cannot knock the visual and special effects aesthetics that has been put in together for the Bond flick since 2006. Metro-Goldwyn have really stepped up their game and brought the best visual artists to really take the franchise forward, especially with the opening titles that are just as weird and artistic as ever before. But you know as well as I do, it ain't Bond if it doesn't have a weird opening. As for what I think of the score, Thomas Newman put out a fantastic piece that honours the Bonds of the past whilst giving it some new edge in not only car chase scenes, but to the penultimate scene at the ruins of MI6, blowing up said building, and the tension of not knowing if Bond would pull the trigger on Blofeld. And what do I think in total? All in all, despite going with the lead protagonist that has about as much charismatic prowess as a piece of wood these days, this was a satisfying conclusion to what began 12 years ago with the very first James Bond novel being adapted for the big screen. All the loose ends were finally tied up. Because ever since Casino Royale, you felt that there was something else at play in the shadows that was making life difficult for 007. Mind you, that's not to say he had it easy to begin with at all, but then again, a challenge is part of the fun. And with this reportedly being Craig's last movie, oh please, oh please, oh please, oh please, oh please, oh please, pardon me, then it's not a bad way for him to bow out. I'm personally hoping for either Tom Hiddleston or Michael Fassbender to replace him. At the very least, we know Tom has charisma and the capability to make Bond have the same humour as that of Roger Moore or Pierce Brosnan. Those are my thoughts.